All right, we're here with Rachel Robinson making her first appearance at NDK.
True
Great
story.
to have you.
Great to be here.
Are you liking Colorado so far?
I actually lived in Colorado for about
Oh, okay.
6 years.
Really?
But I was in Boulder for a little less than a year and then lived in Telluride.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful little bubble. But I haven't been back to Denver in almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of feels like it's new and it kind of feels like coming home.
Yes, a lot's changed, but a lot hasn't,
Right.
especially in Boulder.
Oh, well, yeah, no rush.
Well, yeah, why change it? If it's not broken, why not fix it? Why fix
Sure.
it?
Exactly.
So let's see. I read in your bio that you do a lot of accent work.
Yes,
Um,
I focus on a lot of
Yeah.
dialects.
Was there something specific that kind of brought you around to doing a lot of accent dialect work? Is it something you've always been interested in, or did you find yourself like just getting a lot of work that was like that, and it just kind of caught on? Or
I think it was always something that I focused on. I always had an ear for language. Apparently, I spoke fairly fluent Spanish when I was a child, although I could certainly use some practice now. But I've always loved language and accents and dialects, and I love etymology, and I love the history of words and where they come from. I took Latin when I was in junior high school, and that
Oh, wow.
proved very, very helpful
Yeah.
for things like Spanish, French, and Italian,
Yep.
and a bunch of other things. So yeah, I guess it became more of a focus. I actually took a dialect class when I was a teenager with Larry Moss, who is one of the foremost dialect coaches
Yep.
in the world, and you'd swear if he did 75 dialects in a row, you'd swear he was from any one of those countries or regions. So yeah, I'm not comparing myself to him. I'm just saying, having had a chance to study with it, it's just
Sure.
something I've loved. And I think getting the role of Fang was very helpful because I had just always loved the Australian accent. I have family
Oh, really?
who's outside of Sydney.
oh, wow.
And so, so I will always read for any role that comes along, pretty much. I mean, and some accents I have a harder time with than others, certainly. Some I just, bang out
Yep.
like that, and things like Scandinavian is always tough without
Yeah.
sounding like the Swedish chef.
Yeah.
So it all takes practice, but I absolutely love it.
Do you have a particular favorite?
I love Scottish. Love it. And I don't mean, of course it's fun to do the groundskeeper Willie stuff.
Yes.
Or, Mike Myers' dad.
Yep.
But I had a Scottish soccer coach when I was in high school. So, he'd scream at us, and he was kind of cartoonish. So after a while I just go, you look like a bunch of grandmothers, move! And so I love that. Australian, of course.
Yep.
Lots of British dialects, not just sort of
Oh, yeah.
your basic Elizabethan
Yeah,
aristocrat.
there's so many.
I really, I'm fond of South American accents. I'm fond, although Portuguese still I struggle with a little
Yeah.
bit, and Spanish accents, and all, certainly regions in our own home country. I'm real fond of, and I like kind of making something hybrid. It's
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're all pretty much fun, but yeah, there's
Sure.
some that are tough. The Israeli accent can be very tough.
Yeah.
And then you find there are a lot of dialects that are fairly similar. Sometimes I will morph into Australian when I'm doing British, or
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm doing German, it'll start going to Russian. It's very,
Oh,
very
wow.
strange, but yeah, that's just the sort of psychotic brain of a voice. There's way too many voices up there.
Well, yeah, and you start realizing because they all so many derive from each other.
Yes,
And they all just kind of blend together.
absolutely.
And see, and you do a lot of you kind of straddle the fence between like video games and animation. Which do you prefer to do on a regular basis, or do you have a preference?
I like working. I have tended to. I actually started out doing a lot of commercials. That was just where I booked a vast majority of my work.
Yeah.
And then as time wore on, I think the first time I worked with an ensemble cast was on Celebrity Deathmatch.
Oh yeah.
With the sort of the second coming of Celebrity Deathmatch, and there I got to play Pamela Anderson
Yep.
and Vern Troyer. Same episode, different death matches.
Same episode? Wow.
So it was just one of the, I was lucky. They're like, did anyone do this? And I was like, well, I can. He's 2 feet tall. His voice is higher than mine, for sure. I read for. I haven't done as much original animation, and I would certainly love to do more.
Yeah.
I tended to start to book more video game work because there are a lot of fantasy games, a
Yeah.
lot of fighting games, and it was nice that there were more roles for tougher women or
Yeah.
whatever it was. But again, I like working, and I've really, as far as anime goes, I've only pretty recently started to do that, but I love it.
Yeah.
It is a lot of fun, and it's challenging.
It really is.
Yeah.
Or were you were you into anime before you started doing work for it?
Honestly, I mean, I grew up with things like Speed Racer and
Yep.
reruns of Kimba the White Lion, and a lot of, and I was familiar with some of these shows.
Yeah.
But when I started really throwing myself into voiceover, I think my purview was kind of, it was a narrower focus, I should say. Not that I didn't like anime, it just was, I think also when I had come home, I lived in Colorado for those years, and I went to school in New York State, so I think a lot of that kind of bypassed my radar.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of educate myself after the fact. And a lot of, it's a huge community. It's actually not that huge, it just feels huge because these are all the people you know. But, I have a lot of friends who are in their, mid to late 20s, and like, this is the stuff they grew up with, and it's, it's their passion, and they're super attached to it. And so I learned from them. And then I found, there's, how many animes are there in the world? You never know, and the number will always keep growing.
Yes.
So it's hard to know what's good and what's not.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, who I deem the experts. And luckily I found some amazing stuff, and then stuff that's sort of, eh.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that I'd heard of. I was a little old for Sailor Moon. I was a little old for Gem and that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But, Sailor Moon's come back in a big way. And that's super cool. So,
Yeah.
I'm kind of learning as I go. And then there's other stuff I remember. I date myself all the time when I tell people the video games that I grew up with.
Some of like those classic Atari.
If it was an arcade game,
Oh, yeah.
like Donkey Kong, Frogger, Centipede, Galaga, Tempest, Tron, which I just saw at a pawn shop and vintage something store, and like, that cost more than my car. But yeah, Tron, like the Ridge. So,
Yeah.
And I was really good at Super Mario Brothers. So. I play games from time to time now, but I don't have a console in my house because I would never leave.
Let's see. What are the kind of inherent differences in voicing something for animation, like an anime or an animated series versus a video game?
What I've found over time, I mean, this is not always true for every situation, but just sort of as a general rule, animation, if you're really, boiling it down to simple principles, I find that original animation, although you've seen it kind of tended to go more mature and more real sounding voices and less cartoony, I think generally it's tended to be like the difference between people in a comedy versus people in a drama. People in a comedy are portrayed to look worse than they are. People in a drama are portrayed to look better than they are. And while that's kind of trite to apply to the same thing, I'd say video games have become really sophisticated, very long. They're like 65-hour movies, and there's, they're incredibly cinematic, and the animation's just gorgeous. And unless it's a game whose premise is to be silly, like say Mario Kart or whatever, it is full on like theater.
Yeah.
I don't mean like summer stock, but just
Well, sure,
there's a lot of gravitas, and you have to be a good actor. You have to be a good actor for any of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I auditioned for original animation does tend to be, while they want somebody who's kind of real sounding, it's the situations are much sillier.
Sure, yeah.
And then maybe that's what it is. The situations are silly in animation, even if they want somebody who just kind of talks like this, like that. But in video games, there's just and I'm sure there are funny lines. But most of the time, the whole purpose of why you're in that game is conflict.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I found to be most true.
Well, especially with with so many of the games becoming kind of more like visual novels.
Yeah.
Like The Last of Us. It's they're becoming kind of Shakespearean in scope.
That's accurate. I would definitely agree with that.
I mean, not all of them certainly, but there's a few of those standouts that really.
It's not ski season yet.
It's anime season.
Yeah.
Let's see. When you're doing a video game, do you do a lot of like fighting games? Kind of?
Yeah. I've done a lot of shooters.
Yeah.
And or games that are both fantasy and fighting, or I
Uh-huh.
should say, battle driven.
Okay, yeah.
So there's a lot of grunting and groaning and screaming and dying and
Yeah.
being set on fire and electrocuted and stuff that I have no actual frame of reference
Sure.
for in real life. But yeah, it takes it out of you. I'm not sure if that's where you were going with that.
Well, I was going to ask along those lines of
Mm.
is it more taxing to do something like, a couple hours worth of fighting noises
Mm-hmm.
and things like that versus something that's a little talkier like anime.
I mean, honestly, it certainly depends on the anime, and actually people have asked why I don't do audiobooks. I'm like, because you talk for 8 straight
Yeah.
hours.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not screaming, it's still going to take it out of
Yep.
you. I don't know. I mean, I've thought about it from time to time. I've never felt the same gravitation towards that. Yeah, I tend to get hoarse easily. Go figure. Even with, hydration
Yeah.
and honey syrup and all that sort of thing. So if there is that, they usually save it for the end of the session.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to be dying or doing some kind of extended battle scream. And look, there are people who do this all day long and they're fine because they've
Wow.
trained their voice and
Yeah.
their vocal cords to not get ripped up. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if I did it all the time, it would get better too. On the other hand, I hear these horror stories and, I've already got a scratchy voice, which, believe me, I'm happy about because it's why I get to work. But, I don't want to damage it further.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not to say like I don't do screamers. No, I will, but just know that you might have to parse it out.
Sure.
I mean, with anime, actually, a lot of the anime that I've done plenty of screaming in those too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm kind of thrilled when I have one of those days where I am just right down here in that register because I'm like, you make my job so easy. But whatever the character demands,
Mhm.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. Do you do anything? Do you have like any kind of regimen for taking care of your voice?
I probably should have more of one. I know a lot of people are very ritual oriented.
Mhm.
Usually, if I know it's going to be kind of a screamy session, I'll come armed with lozenges. There's a Chinese honey loquat syrup that every voice actor I know has in their house, and there's usually one in the studio called Ninjan Peipakwa. Ninjan Peipakwa. I have like 2 unfinished bottles at home that I can't throw away because there's kind of not enough to pour, but it's too much to throw out,
yeah.
and I'm like, I will use it somehow. A couple
Just buy it in
teaspoonfuls of
bulk.
that. If I have to keep screaming, I just keep it handy.
Nice.
Hot water is always helpful.
Mhm.
Little lemon.
Yep.
Just drink tons of water. Sometimes maybe even a little singing because it kind of
Really?
loosens the throat muscles
Yeah.
depending on what song you sing and how
Uh-huh.
far away you are from other people when you do it. I honestly, I probably should have a more consistent thing, but depending on what I know, I may not be doing the same thing each time. So
Well, yeah, and I can see the virtue of that too. You shake it up a little bit so you don't become too accustomed to it. So
like I said, I'm so happy to work that
Yeah.
whatever I work, it's like, okay, if I know I'm going to be doing this.
Mhm.
But almost every single session, if they know what they're doing and they care about the performance, they
Yeah.
know that, if you have to do it, save it till the very end,
Yeah.
especially if you've got a lot of lines to
Mhm.
record before that. Unless you can recover in just a few minutes. Usually I'm kind of done for the weekend once I've had a throat ripper like that.
I can imagine. Even just talking, because I'm I'm not a voice actor. Even talking, for a few hours uninterrupted, and I can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
What is the, for lack of a better word, roughest role or like recording session you've done? When I mean roughest, not like necessarily on your voice, but
Mhm.
emotionally. What's like one of the roughest roles that you've had that just sapped you? Because there's so many in anime and in video games.
Honestly, I don't, if we were just approaching it from a purely physical standpoint, I'm fortunate, I guess. I can't really think of any that sort of, left me bleeding on the floor.
Yeah.
There's always moments
Sure.
that I'm kind of like, there's one that I actually finished up a few months ago that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Okay.
And it kills me because it's probably, in my mind, I'm like, it should be out by now, but that's not up to me.
I know.
But it was there was one moment where actually we did the scream, And I was just kind of wasted, tired from the day,
Oof.
and we ended up having to redo it. And I had to hold it.
Yeah.
And there was no way to cheat it because it was like focused in on her that whole entire time, and it was a good 6-7 seconds of a sustained scream, which is, you know, kind of like an earthquake. It feels like forever. So I would say that. I mean, although, and that actually was a very interesting role because the character's pretty stoic, and doesn't say much, but when she chooses her words, she doesn't waste them.
Yep.
And if she gets angry, there's a real good reason for it.
Yeah.
Fang was emotionally taxing too because I spent so much time with her.
Yeah.
I mean, people ask me what the favorite is, and I'm going to say, in so many categories. I know it sounds cliche, but she kind of put me on the map, and it was the longest character, or the most amount of time I had with a character to grow and learn and develop and build from the ground up. So that means a lot to me, and there was a lot of emotional involvement. You get to a point where you sort of meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. I mean, not a lot of people can say that. Some people can say that, and I don't have dozens and upon dozens of lead roles.
Yeah.
Which makes this one really special. Yeah.
For to kind of go back to Celebrity Deathmatch, I watched that when I was a teenager.
It's just demented.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm surprised my parents let me watch half the stuff I watched. But for something like celebrity impersonations, is something like that like a whole different approach because you have to consciously match somebody else?
It's funny, and it's a great question because I get a lot of auditions for voice matches, and they want something that is dead accurate. And sometimes, even if you can impersonate the character, the tone, the pitch, there has to be something in your voice that is undiscernible from them to other people's ears. So either it's there or it's not, and it's not even that you did a bad job. They actually make a point of saying that the celebrity voices are impersonated badly. So
so they don't get sued.
It just has exactly. So it just has to be close enough that it's them. It's funny because when I booked Pamela Anderson, I was like, did you make a mistake? Because that was one of those things where I was like, I'll give it a shot, but I don't sound anything like her. And maybe it was something in just the way I pitched my voice up and a sing-songy quality. They're like, you nailed it. And I'm like, thank you. But I thought, I don't understand. Then I read for Lindsay Lohan thinking I was just a dead lock. And so it's just, it's for that, it actually is, I think maybe that's why it's kind of such a joke. That they maybe it is that so they don't get sued and they're saying ridiculous things.
Yes.
And they're literally getting pulverized and smashed to bits, and they're doing horrible, disgusting things to each other.
Yeah, which is why I'm shocked my parents let me watch that.
Oh, I mean, I think my parents would have thought it was too stupid to be like offensive or graphic. Although sometimes I'm like, geez, really? Somebody thought of that to do in claymation? Like that takes a lot of work. So
I'm still surprised my parents let me watch Ren and Stimpy when I was a child.
I loved Ren and Stimpy.
I did too, but my parents let me watch that when I was in grade school. And I go back now and I'm like,
they're probably like, hey, as long as she's not out stealing cars,
I don't know. I've had conversations with them. It's like, you let me watch this when I was 8?
I guess, I used to watch Tom and Jerry, which when I look at it now, I'm like, it's pretty violent.
It is,
not
but
in the same way.
Compared to something like Ren and Stimpy.
But it was never disgusting.
Well, that's
true. It was
true.
violent, but it was never like...
Well, it was very cartoony. Ren and Stimpy was kind of a whole other level of just cranking it up and making it, just pushing it as far as they could.
Yeah, it's getting grosser, too.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, cartoons in general are getting disgusting.
That's the flavor.
Yeah.
Have you done celebrity impersonations that are closer to what the person actually sounds like? Or are they more cartoony?
I mean, I have actually a whole demo. I think it's on my website somewhere. And this is just raw voices with no effects or music or anything like that. And I run the gamut from Katharine Hepburn to Joan Crawford to Whoopi Goldberg to Tangina from Poltergeist, and I forget. I mean, it's just I sort of zeroed in on what I thought I was good at and certainly worked on it. I have auditioned to be a Glenn Close voice match. I've auditioned to
Wow.
be an Angelina Jolie voice match.
Mhm.
They'll never give me anything that is too far out of range.
Yeah.
You know, like they'll never send me like a Kristen Bell voice match or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, and it doesn't have to be perfect. They just, you know,
Mhm.
they want to know what you can do. And of
Yeah.
course, obviously, with the magic of technology, they can probably
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit
That's for sure.
as well. So.
For something like for those celebrity voice matches, what are those like? Are those used? What exactly are those like intended for?
Sometimes it's if the celebrity can't make it in to finish pickups for a session.
Oh.
It has probably more to do with their schedule, or they're
Mhm.
out of town, or it's just kind of not worth it for them because they're busy
Yeah.
doing something else. And if it's just 3 lines, and it's sort of like, you know, we don't want to.
Sure.
That's most of the time what it is. There are
Mhm.
probably other reasons that I'm not sure about, but
Has
yeah.
that ever included dubbing, like doing like a broadcast dub, like when they dub over language to make it appropriate for TV or something?
I know that it has.
Mhm.
I have a friend who is a frequent voice match for George Clooney,
Oh wow.
and which is nice work if you can get it.
Oh yeah.
And I think he did. I think a lot of it was pickups for Up in the Air and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's been promos or not,
Hmm.
but I think that can
Yeah.
that can happen for sure.
Because I would imagine with being as busy as they are, it
Oh,
would be,
yeah.
that would be
It's sort of
difficult.
like, you know, sorry,
for-
I'm in Prague and, you know,
Yeah.
making a $20 million movie. Can you just get somebody else to record
Yeah.
the 3 lines? And yeah, I mean, in my experience, that's most often
Yeah.
what it is.
Hmm.
Or if, you know, maybe they're just like, I don't want to work on the project. You know?
Yeah.
Which would, you know, I'm sure they would never tell you, but
Oh, I would hope not.
I mean, and they are, you know, to be fair, you know, a lot of them won't work for scale. So,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, I will.
It's like, oh,
So-
there's a job for you. I'll take it. Yep.
Exactly.
So you're based out of LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming you do most of your work in LA with
Yeah.
all the studios there.
Yeah, I mean, if there's work to be found wherever I go, I'll do
Yeah,
it. And I
sure.
actually was at a con a few years ago and had booked a job, and I said, well, I'm going to be in Connecticut. There's nothing I can do. If you can find a studio that's nearby, great. So there's always a way to make it happen. even
Yeah.
if you're not at home, and there's places everywhere.
Sure, but I'm sure I'd imagine that's where the you know the
That's for the vast
really great
majority
ones.
of it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Nickelodeon's there, and Cartoon
Yeah.
Network, and Studiopolis, and, you know, places
Bang
that
Zoom.
produce and Bang
Yep.
Zoom, and places that produce their
Wow.
own, and, you know, Warner Brothers Animation.
Sure, yeah.
And you name it. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that there aren't other places that are great either. But
Well,
that's,
sure.
you know.
Yeah.
But I would tell anybody who is an aspiring voice actor, if they're absolutely serious, at some point, yes, be in LA.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this stuff is more accessible.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just start. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Ooh, 2 minutes. Okay. Do you have something scheduled after this, or?
I don't think so.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm
Anything.
not running over into your schedule. So.
No, I've got
Okay.
a whole lot of lying down to do.
How's the altitude treating you?
You know, it's not bad. Of course, I say that now. I've only been here for about 6 or 7 hours. Like I said, I lived at altitude for a number of years,
Yeah.
but I haven't lived at altitude for
Sure.
14. So I suspect that if I, you know, follow the rule and
Mhm.
drink tons and tons of water
Yeah.
and I'm not stupid, then I should feel okay.
Yeah.
I'm tired and I'm hungry, which is not
Well,
abnormal.
Yeah, that's really common for an
Yeah.
altitude change.
I mean, I just ate my weight in barbecue up there. So I was like, food!
yeah.
And normally I don't, you know, like I've got one plate and I'm done. But
Yeah,
I
not
I
here.
could have kept going if
Yeah.
I didn't have to leave. I was just like, oh, but there's still beef left.
Yeah, well, I grew up here, but I was born in New York, and we moved out here when I was
Okay.
like 4.5. My mom lived in New York her entire life before that, so she spent a good 2 weeks just asleep. She went from sea level to, you know, up here.
When I first got
Just-
here, when I first got to Colorado, I had trouble sleeping for weeks.
Really?
And yeah, I had the opposite problem. And then I started taking melatonin, and that
Mhm.
worked. And then you just get into a rhythm.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
and everybody, at least in Telluride, was just a ridiculously talented, crazy athlete
Yeah.
with like 10 times the lung capacity as
Yeah,
anyone else.
yeah.
So you're constantly playing,
Mhm.
and you get yourself tired enough that you go to sleep at night and you're just like, out.
Yeah, well, and every venue here keeps oxygen cans on hand.
Oh, great.
Because so many people come in from out of town. Like,
Well, they don't know.
and
I
yeah,
used
and
to
you
work
just
at a
don't know
hotel,
what's-
and I would have to tell
Yep.
people, look, drink more water than you can possibly stand, because
Yeah.
you're just going to be standing there, and you will pass out with your eyes open, and we're
Yep.
going to have to bring somebody to put you on a feeding tube.
Yeah, that's why it's the first rule. That's why it's the first guideline in all the guest
Mhm.
books. So.